Drive to Survive really has a lot of parallels regarding B2B software. It just shows competition at the highest level and what it takes to win an extremely challenging environment. If you're a standard B2B marketer doing the standard B2B things in a sea of 15,000 competitive solutions, you're not going to win.
Now, post the revelation that was Drive to Survive, 43% of Formula One fans are now under 35. Female viewership has doubled in many markets, and its fandom has really grown massively in the US. Drive to Survive is now like the main entrance point for many new fans of Formula One.
Part of winning is having a great solution. You can't win without a great solution, but you also have to have great storytelling. And I think that one of the great things about Drive to Survive is that brings the story to life, and it does showcase in more depth like the different elements of what it takes to win.
In B2B, we just make excuses for ourselves about how boring we are. And it's like, not to the people whose jobs it is, who spends their life's work working on this. It's not boring to them. So like, you have to find the story. That's the point. That's your job. That's the hard part.
This is the best thing I've ever seen.
That. Let's talk about that.
Listen to this. Listen to this.
Memorable?
Well, then be less boring.
Boring?
Remarkable.
Remarkable. Remarkable.
Remarkable.
I'm Ian Faison, CEO of Caspian Studios. You're listening to Remarkable. This week, we're talking marketing lessons from Formula One, Drive to Survive.
I'll do anything I can to get the best results possible. I'm not worried about dying.
With the help of our special guest, Chief Marketing Officer at Responsive, Michael, how are you?
I am great, Ian. How are you?
Oh, I am doing wonderful. Excited to chat F1, chat marketing, RFPs, which we've all done many times. And everything in between. So why the heck did you pick Formula One Drive to Survive to talk about today?
You know, I love Drive to Survive, and the reason is it just shows competition at the highest level and, you know, what it takes to win in an extremely challenging environment. You know, Drive to Survive really has a lot of parallels to me regarding B2B software. And so, you know, we as a company are competing in the SaaS environment. There are actually 15,000 SaaS go-to-market solutions out there. So hyper competitive. And if we compare that to, you know, kind of Formula One, Drive to Survive, you know, it's just extremely competitive. And so basically 10 of the top teams in the world coming together, 2 drivers each, competing through a series of races over the course of a season and trying to, you know, have one driver emerge as the champion driver and then a team emerges as the championship team, and just like what's involved with trying to win. It's just absolutely incredible in terms of the people, the strategy, the execution that's required to win. So I see some parallels between that and B2B software. And so that's why it really resonates with me.
And zooming out, tell us about Responsive and your role as CMO.
Yeah, so Responsive is the category leader of an emerging category that we've been evangelizing called strategic response management. And so I joined in 2022 when the company was still known as RFPIO. And so we've rebranded to Responsive, but our focus is on helping companies put forth trusted winning responses, RFPs, security questionnaires, due diligence questionnaires, and more. And so my role is really around messaging and positioning related to the company within the category, helping shape the category, and then driving overall category leadership. And we can dive down into bits and pieces of that as makes sense, but it's been, you know, in the time that I've been here, it's been a really incredible journey.
Meredith, what the heck is Drive to Survive?
So Drive to Survive, or Formula One Drive to Survive, is a behind-the-scenes series about Formula One racing. It was actually originally pitched by this company called Box to Box Films as a documentary, so more of like a film-length feature film focused on the Red Bull team only. But Sean Bratches, who's part of F1 leadership, pushed to have it be this bigger project that he wanted it to introduce the sport to a much wider audience. Yeah. The show is then developed by these executive producers, James Gay-Rees and Paul Martin, who are both known for producing high-end sports documentaries. At the time, F1 fans were mostly older, mostly male, very European centric. And so Paul Martin says that like he wasn't sure if the show would be successful at first because he was like, that first season, there were definitely times when we thought we'd been off more than we could chew, particularly in those early days. We really didn't have a clue what the shape of the show would be, how difficult it was going to be, whether we could even do it, and how much the teams would buy into it. But one of the meetings we'd had in Abu Dhabi had been with Haas team principal Gunther Steiner. And literally within the first 2 minutes of talking with him, both James and I were like, well, that guy's a character. There was just a feeling the moment we met him that if people were willing to talk about the sport and be as honest as this guy, then actually we could end up with a pretty phenomenal show. So he was the reason why they're like, there could be something to this.
I'm not feeling like a superstar. I'm just doing my job, and it's good if the people like it.
Both Martins and Garys decided to focus on driver personalities, rivalries, behind the scenes drama, and just overall relatable storytelling instead of just the technical aspect of racing, because they thought that would sort of appeal to a broader audience.
You've got a party boy reputation. Is that fair? No.
Gary said bringing such a big new audience to a sport, which obviously was deserved, it just needed somebody to open it up, is massively satisfying. So now, post the revelation that was Drive to Survive, 43% of Formula One fans are now under 35, which is new. Female viewership has doubled in many markets, and its fandom has really grown massively in the US. And Drive to Survive is now like the main entrance point for many new fans of Formula One. So I'm wondering, Michael, were you a fan of Formula One before this series came out?
I was familiar. I think like a lot of Americans, I was familiar with Formula One and interested in Formula One, but I was not deeply familiar in any sort of way. And so, to your points, Meredith, the show has really, provided much broader access, I think, to audiences. And I think, the way rivalries are brought to life is really compelling, and I think is driving viewership and just interest in Formula One. And so my interest kind of stemmed from the fact that we made a theme of our kickoff, annual company kickoff, going from rowing to racing. And Formula One was the sort of visual execution and that where we kind of brought that theme to life. In 2023, our company kickoff theme was around one team, one mission. And we had, basically a crew shell with rowers in it, all rowing in the same direction. So we're trying to get the team all rowing in the same direction. So that was sort of the theme of that year. And then the next year, 2024, the theme that we landed on, which resonated really well internally, was this idea of going from rowing to racing. And again, we brought that to life with Formula One. It was after that I actually became familiar with, Drive to Survive, and like, oh wow, this is amazing, and was really kind of drawn in by the rivalries, by just the getting visibility into like what was required to win and so on.
That's amazing. Do you have a favorite team, favorite driver?
I do. So my favorite team is McLaren, and my favorite driver is Landon Norris. And I think if I look at what the McLaren team was able to achieve last year, it's really amazing. I mean, the dominant driver was has been Max Verstappen with Red Bull, and just absolutely incredible. He's won 4 championships in a row. And so to see the McLaren team kind of come together with 2 very strong drivers, Landon Norris and Oscar Piastri, and to win both the Drivers' Championship and the Constructors' Cup as well was just phenomenal. And in the head-to-head competitive situation up until the very last race was really interesting to watch. And the second to the last race, the McLaren team made a strategic mistake and chose not to pit at one point during the race, where all the other teams pitted. And so it was a strategic mistake. They ended up losing the race, and that actually put Max in a position which he could actually win the Drivers' Championship in the last race of the season. And he'd come from way behind, and that's a story of resilience. He'd come from way behind and was in a position to actually win. But ultimately, the McLaren team pulled it out in that final race. And so just kind of seeing those dynamics and the interplay between people, team, and execution was phenomenal. But it's easy to be, the biggest, fan of the winning team, but seeing them come through is like really incredible.
I was reading that F1 is described as more of chess, whereas NASCAR is described as like a bar brawl. And I thought that was really interesting. So you talking about the strategy behind it makes me really think about that. Every little thing counts. Every little thing matters. Every decision.
I mean, that's one of the reasons why, Drive to Survive so compelling, because it really does give visibility into some of the things that are happening. And so, like, end of the day, a big part of Formula One and Drive to Survive is the engineering. Like the way in which the car is engineered, like the teams are given, a set of requirements and rules that they have to work within. And those are generally consistent year over year, although like every 5 or 6 years, there are like major changes. But the teams have to work within those constraints. And the actual engineering that goes into a car plays a huge role in whether or not the team itself can win. So on the surface, it looks like, well, who's got the best driver? The cars all look the same. Well, the best driver that's not in a great car is not going to win. And so to the point about, playing chess and stuff, like a lot of the chess gamesmanship is in the car design itself, combined with how the race is actually executed. And it's not just by the driver, it's by the team strategy team that's making calls on things like whether or not to pit, as well as the pit crew itself. And it goes way beyond that too, but like the pit crew has to execute flawlessly for the team to win or for the driver to win. And so it's chess, I would agree with that, but it's multi-dimensional chess, just absolutely fascinating way.
I think the first sort of big takeaway for me from Drive to Survive is that without characters and without story, everything else is going to fall flat, right? Like the reason why like sport is so compelling to, why it spreads so much, why the Olympics is so popular is the stories, right? Like that's like the whole thing. And when you take people like Michael Jordan or whoever and make them larger than life, like all of a sudden, like you have stories. Why like way more people tune in when there's dynasties and all this stuff, right? Is like, because you get familiar with the people, right? Is like, I want to see if Steph Curry's going to win a 5th championship or whatever. Not this year, sadly. Yeah. and so I think for F1, like by bringing all of that stuff to life, now all of a sudden you have like this like story. But the story was always there. That's what's so funny, right? It just took storytellers to bring it out. Like that same, like you could have done, Drive to Survive, like season -1, 2, 3, 4, whatever. Like those type of stories were always there. Maybe they weren't like as good, maybe I'm sure having Max win as much as he has been absolutely massive for the sport, right? Like that's a huge deal. But like the consistency of this, and the brands and all the characters and all these things now brings it all to life. And something like that we struggle with in B2B, this idea of like, how do you make engineering fun and sexy, right? And it's like, yeah, if you're in, driving around big cars, but there's not a lot of engineering, car shows that have ever been, super successful, right? Like there's a lot of car shows that have really good characters that have been successful, right, but not a lot of ones about sort of like the engineering. And so it took master storytellers to bring all this stuff to life and to bring the humans behind all of this to life.
And I totally agree with that. And I think you're actually hitting up on the essence of marketing, in my view, which is storytelling. And so the storytelling that the Drive to Survive team have brought to life is really incredible. And it's in a big part of it, the majority of it is these rivalries and creating these tension between the teams and tensions within the teams and tensions, and the tension can exist between drivers because every team, there are 10 teams that are competing in Drive to Survive. They all have two racers. In the case of McLaren, they have 2 top racers. And, in some cases, the drivers themselves need to collaborate with one another, but they both want to win. And so there can be tension around that, but just a lot of interpersonal dynamics that come into play. What's super interesting to me in Drive to Survive as well is that there are teams like Red Bull with Max that consistently win in a hyper competitive environment. Just like there are SaaS software companies or software companies that consistently win in a hyper competitive environment. Part of winning is having a great solution. You can't win without a great solution, but you also have to have great storytelling. And I think that one of the great things about Drive to Survive is it brings the story to life, and it does showcase in more depth like the different elements of what it takes to win.
The other thing that I think is worth noting here is that this whole started with a brand.
Right.
And the only reason why Drive to Survive happens is because somebody reaches out to say, hey, let's do a documentary on Red Bull racing.
Right.
And the only reason why you would do that is because Red Bull is interesting and a global brand name in a way that is always interesting because they're so good at really everything now, which is crazy. They're better at soccer and racing. And, yeah, it's crazy. And definitely, of course, energy drinks. But I think that there's a really good B2B lesson there, which is start with the easiest possible path into a story. I think so often people will say oh, hey, our VP of whatever is like super brilliant. Let's make some stuff for them. And it's instead of being oh, hey, we have this really, really funny person on the engineering team. And let's just make videos with the funny person,
Right.
Because that's the easier path in. And we could probably get some good stuff there versus trying to start out at a place that, that isn't that way. And I think that a good storyteller, in the same way that when they started talking to people, realizing that oh, there's characters here, that every character plays a role in this sort of ensemble. And that's what we should do in B2B marketing as well, right? It's there's this ensemble of characters. And in Drive to Survive, you don't know all of them. They don't all get equal airtime, but
right.
The most interesting ones get a lot of airtime. And then the important ones get a lot of airtime, but they don't always cover them in the same way, right? Because they don't have as much access to them. So I think just figuring that out, and for a marketing team, just trying to find the easy, fun, cool stories or brands or whatever, and figure out a way to tell those stories, or say, okay, this is an easy way in. Telling a story about Red Bull racing, people will probably be kind of interested in that because it's Red Bull racing. And then, oh, by the way, now we went under the hood, pardon the pun, and there's all these super fun characters that we can now expand. And oh, wouldn't you know it, F1 has all these other characters too. And you wouldn't have known that unless you sort of started down the road of doing the project in the first place.
Yeah, I think, the point of storytelling, having characters and being clear on who the characters are is important. If you look at Red Bull itself, Red Bull it's an energy drink, right? And so if you're trying to market an energy drink, that's not necessarily an easy thing. It's a hyper competitive market as well, right? And so the way they've been able to rise above the noise is through brilliant marketing and storytelling, with Drive to Survive being, an outgrowth of that. And Red Bull, even though it started off focused initially on Red Bull is super prominent, kind of throughout that. And so they've definitely done, significant brand building. From my perspective, from a B2B marketing perspective, to me, the characters that are most resonant are customers. And so customers that are leveraging a solution and getting real value and having impact, being able to shape what their own companies are doing and having fun doing it. And so one of the things that's been super interesting for us at Responsive is around this idea of evangelizing the emergence of this new category called strategic response management versus just response management or RFP management. Ian, nobody really enjoys doing RFPs. It's not the sexiest thing. And when you think of RFP teams, most people think of back office folks that are grinding away at, answering questions. So, it doesn't sound super sexy, but the practical reality is those teams are on the front lines of winning business for their companies. And so reframing those teams' roles from RFP teams to strategic response teams that are directly driving impact, and then helping those teams be able to communicate the value internally more effectively in terms of driving business outcomes like faster growth, better experience and stuff, is an opportunity to unlock the value they can deliver within the organizations, increase their profile within the organizations, and help them drive impact. And so, as we're talking, I'm thinking about the parallel, Red Bull energy drink, making that relevant becomes hyper relevant, carrying that over to like RFP teams, reframing their role in terms of strategic response management, activating their voices in the marketplace, and then seeing career progression. We've seen like RFP team leaders take on very significant roles within their organizations, senior leadership roles, once the impact they're having is better understood. And so, part of that storytelling, it's like, it's like the right framing, strategic response management. It's the right characters, people that can articulate the story or, highlight certain things. And so it's fascinating to see the role marketing can play in terms of like unlocking interest and value and impact that others can have.
Yeah. I have another takeaway for Drive to Survive. I love how the guy Paul Martin talks about how that first season, there were definitely times where we thought we'd bitten off more than we could chew.
Right.
And we didn't really have a clue of what the shape of the show would be. Oh, it's interesting. I think in marketing, you always want everything to be certain. You always want to be exact. You want to create a brief and to go pitch your CFO and to say, hey, I need these dollars for this. And in advertising, that's the case, right? Because the actual ad that you create, the video ad or static ad or whatever it is, or digital ads, whatever, like is the thing, right? So you make it and you put it out in the world and people like and click and whatever, or they don't. It drives value or it doesn't, right? But in content and in storytelling, especially in nonfiction storytelling, you have to find the story, right? So you start out with a premise and you don't know what's going to happen because you don't know what is going to be said. And like documentary filmmaking is like completely different. And yet we treat our storytelling in B2B as if it's the same as building an ad campaign. And it's not at all, right? What do? We script. We heavily script, right? We script all the answers. We give them to the person to say the answers. They read the answers. And then that's the thing that we publish. And then we wonder why we struggle with authenticity. We wonder like why it's like nobody engages. It's like, yeah, because it's not, whatever. And so I'm something like Drive to Survive, which looks so good. You would never in a million years have ever thought that they struggled at all. You just would, you watch season 1 and you're just like, that is perfect. Like, 5 stars, couldn't be better. This is amazing. You would never think that they struggled, but they were struggling. They didn't know what the story would be. They didn't know the characters would be. They didn't know how to spin it all together. They didn't know any of that stuff. They didn't even know what they were going to get. They didn't know if people were going to talk to them. They didn't know if they were going to get time from any of these people. And those things are the exact same things that a B2B marketing team deals with. How could I get the time? How could I get customers time? When can I get their time? How am I going to record them? What are they going to say? Are they going to say anything about us? Are they not? Should we script them? Should we not? What about our CEO? Should we get them? What if we put our CEO with this person? Oh, are they going to not have time? Like all that stuff is the hard stuff. Like that's the hard part. And so what people kind of do is they like don't do that because they want to optimize for control, whereas optimizing for serendipity is a far better strategy, even if you don't know. And what happens sometimes is you might not get anything. And that's okay too, right? It's like there's shows that are just as good as Drive to Survive that never made the air. They just never made it, right? But I was talking to this guy he worked at MTV for a long time. And this was right around when Tiger King came out. And he was telling me, he's like, I have on a bunch of like hard drives, a crazier show than Tiger King. He's like, I was there, like MTV didn't want to do it. So I was like, whatever, I'll just do it. And me and a few friends, we follow this guy around for like a year. And it was just like this super crazy story. And he was like, basically like MTV owns the rights somehow. And so he's like, it's just sitting there, whatever. And I can't do anything with it. And there's so many stories like that in television, but in like B2B marketing, could you imagine? I mean, like, could you imagine if you spent X amount of dollars on some crazy series and it didn't see the light of day, which I've done that too, but there would be hell to pay, and rightly so. I'm not to say that it shouldn't, but it's just this idea that like that finding the story, oh my goodness, that's so scary to a marketing team. We don't know, we can't engineer the outcome that we want. How can we do that? But the truth is that like not engineering the outcome sometimes is the better thing, for the content, if you're trying to celebrate the audience, right? And to bring them in, behind the curtain.
I'm reminded of this idea that this thing I learned from Keith Kroc, who was the CEO and co-founder of Ariba and then CEO of DocuSign when I was there. And his comment was that luck is when opportunity meets preparation.
Right.
And so that's where serendipity kind of happens. And so there's, you cannot be lucky, if you will, without a lot of preparation and a lot of grinding it out and a lot of like hard work trying to figure out that story. I mean, that gets to the essence of marketing as well. It's not only storytelling, you're going even further up, which is like, well, what is the story itself? Right? What is the core value proposition? What's the messaging? What's the positioning? What sets this company apart? What's going to like activate a team internally, but also resonate with the market? And then how do you bring that to life with, voice of the customer? And so, in my view, coming up with very simple framing that can be internalized and then added to in a variety of different ways can bring a story to life. It's, marketers kind of responsible for helping build the mosaic. Any individual thing may not pay off, certain events or certain, campaign, certain, piece of content individually might not pay off. But if in general, it's clear what a company's value proposition is, the differentiation, what's exciting to customers and how they're getting value. And that's brought to life with the voice of the customer, with analysts, with articles that are written, with events and so on. Then the story starts to take shape. The other thing that, Ian, that I think is super interesting in building like a high growth business is, the original idea is often not ultimately the winning idea. There's a series of evolutions that need to happen over time. And so that's why it's even more important to be really closely in touch with customers themselves and understanding what's working, what's not, and what's really resonating, so it can drive that refinement and be able to adapt in a marketplace. I mean, in B2B, what we're facing right now is massive disruption with AI, unlike anything I think we've ever seen. And so as, tech companies, you can't continue to exist without an AI story. So you have to have one yourself, but then also how you leverage AI tools effectively, how are you helping your customers be successful and so on. So the story itself, that core idea, the very fundamental idea can persist, but it needs to evolve over time with the times and what's resonating, with an audience.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think that another thing that people sort of like mistake with this is there's like your product story, like there's like your brand story, your product story, and your sort of like customer story. And like those are not the same story. Those are like an ABC story and they interweave, but they are not.
Correct.
Right? Like, because your product story might start here and then go up because a bunch of people are using it, and then that product gets sunsetted someday and will not, like, believe it or not, the product that you love dearly is going to be sunsetted someday, right?
Yeah.
But the brand will not, right? Hopefully. And so your brand story persists, right? And then your customer story, they are, this is one little blip in their journey of many other things. And so, and people just, what they try to do is just condense, and they try to shove them all together, that their brand and their product and this customer are all magically on the same exact storyline. And like, that's not what is happening in reality, and then it comes off as authentic or inauthentic.
Well, and to build on that too, Ian, I think a lot of companies make the mistake, especially emerging tech companies, about over focusing on the product. Let's be honest, nobody cares about the product.
Yeah.
They don't. Like any potential, other than that it works. And so especially someone that's, a prospective buyer, usually the last thing they want to hear, and then they do want to hear about it, is like, well, what are the capabilities of the product? What they want to hear is like, what value can this deliver? Is it delivering it for other customers like me? How is it making their lives better and driving impact in their business? Like that high level story. And then like, okay, tell me a little bit about how it works. And then I'm going to trust you that it works based upon the customer validation you have from others. But that product story, and a lot, again, like even our company. So we were originally named RFPIO, which was great. And that was clear that we were focused on RFPs, and huge kudos to the founders for like building a very successful, company generating tens of millions in revenue, before others like myself joined. But the RFPIO was very product focused. And when we rebranded to responsive, that's a higher value, more interesting concept than RFPIO, which is very product. Like every human wants to be responsive, right? That's an aspiration.
Yeah.
And so, and then when you apply it to something like RFPs or security questionnaires, due diligence questionnaires, of course, companies want to be responsive and they want to resonate with their prospects. And so it works. And then the product story can adjust, over time. But what really, again, brings it to life is the customers, just like it's, with back to Drive to Survive, it's the drivers and the rivalries and the storytelling at the human level versus, hey, let's talk about the engineering. In fact, in all the episodes of Drive to Survive I've seen, very little focus on any of the specifics about the cars, other than like drivers that are phenomenal. They're like, I can't win in this car.
Yeah,
and so that's like and they can't, they literally can't, because the product's not good enough. But there's no detail into like, well, the engine has an issue or whatever. And so, but you're right, there are different levels of storytelling. A lot of emerging companies, they over focus on the product, and the product is critical in terms of winning in the market. But the stories, features generally aren't what win the business. It's the actual value that can be delivered in the customer validation.
Yeah, and I think just like enjoying, like the purpose of F1 is entertainment, right? So it's like,
yes,
enjoying it is like, it's not like a list of facts and features of like, this is the max speed that Max Verstappen went on, like this is, like this is how many times he passed someone. This is like what, like that's like not at all why you watch it. Or maybe I shouldn't say that. Some people, maybe that is why they watch it, and that's great too. But to paint the broader brush, I have to point out the mistakes here, because this is super important. Here's what they screwed up in season 1. So they manufactured rivalries. So like they pushed some narratives that like weren't necessarily like really true. They used radio and audio out of context. So like they switched between races to heighten the drama.
You've done your research,
which is
true.
That's not ideal. They distorted the timeline, so there's stuff out of order.
Creative.
They skipped Ferrari and Mercedes, which is probably pretty big to have those in F1. They made tons of drama out of some of the smaller teams, and all that to say, they made tons of mistakes, but they built a series with a first block that had access like never before. It had the human stories. It made it easy to understand, and it showed all the sort of different elements that come with F1, which is sponsorships and seats and insecurity and budgets and all these other things, which again sound boring, but in the context of a series, a very well edited, produced series, it now is all adds to the drama. And so what does all that mean? Season 2, they fix all that stuff, right? And now what is it? Season 8, I think. And now, and the number of people that watch season 8 that didn't watch season 1 is a lot. And I think like in B2B marketing, we are so obsessed with product launches. We're so obsessed with the launch of your podcast. We're so obsessed with launches, and 99.9% of the value of the thing that you're creating, nobody who was there for launch day remembers, right? So like it is truly the first 100 feet of the marathon. And it's so much more important to say, I am building this thing for the long haul, for season 1, for season 2, for season 10, for season 100, that like we're building this thing. And like that's what they did there. And like season 1 had a million mistakes and it was still incredible because we got to see something that we'd never seen before.
I think, there are real parallels between the evolution of Drive to Survive and startups in general. Like the original idea was a really good idea. Like people are interested, especially once you start to understand, like this isn't just watching someone go around, race around a lap the fastest. Like that actually is quite boring. That's actually what a lot of the racing shows that I remember growing up watching had. Just like, the excitement there was like the crash, right? That was excitement. But otherwise, it was actually pretty boring. And you fast forward to, the start of Drive to Survive, in the recognition, like, hey, to your point, there are characters here. There are some rivalries. There's some tension that we can pull out. There are different dynamics. There's creative storytelling with like mismatches in terms of voiceovers versus what was actually happening and so on. But the kernel of the story was quite interesting and brought to life. And then what the parallel I see to startups is the initial, they saw that, I think they had a sense of what the overall opportunity could be, or quickly started to realize that, and started to be somewhat scalable in the approaches that they took. And they started to develop deeper insights in like, well, what really does resonate? And the rivalry piece is a really big one. The competition over the course of the season, and the key strategic decisions that are made, and those moments are what bring the stories to life. And so focusing in more on those, I think we're probably learnings from season 1 and season 2, and they've just continued to build upon that. So.
Yeah.
And then pulling in brands, like the brands associated. I mean, you look at the Formula One cars driving around, like the brands on the Formula One cars, and like, McLaren as a brand, and Red Bull as a brand. I mean, these are huge brands that people are naturally interested in anyway. And so you tie that into the storytelling too. It becomes even more fascinating.
It's a great lesson. It's just great. It's so, why I love it so much is because it took something that was a little boring for a lot of people and made it interesting. And I think that, like, for me growing up, where I grew up, racing was just like not a thing. Like nobody cared about racing or talked about racing at all, any type of racing. And I know so many people that are F1 fans now. And I think the reason why I love it so much is because in B2B, we do the same exact thing where we just make excuses for ourselves about how boring we are. And we say, well, this thing is boring. And it's like, not to the people whose jobs it is, who spends their life's work working on this. It's not boring to them. So like, you have to find the story. That's the point. That's your job. That's the hard part.
So there are a handful of things. One, in B2B marketing, particularly in software, like it is insanely competitive, just like it is in Formula One, right? Again, back to the 15,000, there are 15,000 different SaaS solutions out there, all, with teams trying to build a viable business. And if you think about it from a go-to-market perspective, any given company can adopt like roughly 30 of those solutions. So that's 0.2%.
Yeah.
So very few. And so how do you, as a B2B marketer, create a story that is actually going to move the needle? And I would argue, first of all, you have to like frame your category in a way that's interesting, and it's a must-have solution. That's why we've become so excited about strategic response management, responsive. And then the second, you have to clearly demonstrate that you're the category leader, but it also, you have to like resonate on the personal level. And so this idea, what's working well for us is this idea of like up-leveling the profession from being back office to being like, no, you're directly impacting revenue. And not only that, you're sitting on a repository of knowledge that can be unlocked across the entire enterprise, helping the company put forth its most compelling current customer-facing information, like for a variety of different use cases. And that actually, it gives you, like, as a user of the solution, it positively impacts your personal life. I mean, if you think about it as well, all of us are consumers first. And we have, these, smartphones that are unbelievable in terms of capabilities, and we can do things super easily. Those expectations are carrying over into the enterprise. And so when we engage with software, we want something that works super well, and we have very short attention spans. And so if the solution itself doesn't actually meet needs quickly and provide a good, positive experience, it's not going to do well. And so that gets to the engineering component of a solution as well. Like, it's important that a solution actually work, but the storytelling around, if the story, like if we tried to land a story like, hey, this will help you, with your, generate RFPs faster, kind of interesting, but not enough. Like, hey, this is a strategic response management platform that unlocks your knowledge across the enterprise so that you can win more business and deliver better customer experiences. That starts to resonate more. And then you bring it to life with people that are actually using it. Then you start to break out through the noise. But if you're a standard B2B marketer doing the standard B2B things in a sea of 15,000 competitive solutions, you're not going to win, right? And that again, it's like one of the takeaways to me from Drive to Survive. Like, these winning teams have cracked the code on ways to win in a hyper competitive environment more than once, like multiple times. And it's not just the driver, it's the entire team. The other thing I'd say about marketing and, CMOs of today, like, they need to think beyond just their own team and think about, like, how do they work with the broader organization, sales, the product team, because you can only win or lose as an entire team. And same in Formula One. That to me was one of the big lessons in Formula One in Drive to Survive. It's not the driver. Like, everyone sees the driver. That's like everyone sees the seller at a company. Like, everyone sees that person, but they don't win or lose on their own. They win or lose based upon the entire team behind them, including the product and overall execution and so on. So anyway,
just one thing to add on that. I think it's also so important to convince your leaders at your company that marketing is an imperative. And I know that this is going to seem like, oh, hey, the marketer's saying marketing is imperative. Sure.
Right. It's a little self-serving.
Right. But I think it is super important, and I'll explain why.
Yeah.
I was doing a video shoot the other day, and the senior executive, we're shooting some video, and this person was incredible on camera. I mean, like, I can't even describe to you how great this person was on camera. Yeah. We showed it to people on our team who see a lot of video, and they were like, wow, like, this person is incredible.
Amazing.
And me as like a creator and as someone who works with, we've worked with like hundreds of B2B companies, anytime I find anyone like this, I'm like begging and pleading their CMO, like, you have to just like back up the dump truck behind this person. This person is a star. Like, when you find a star, like, you have to, go all in. Like, you have to. And if you don't know if they're a star, then they're not a star. But if they are, you got to go all in. And so, so anyways, we're in the office, and the person said, yeah, anything to help marketing. And I thought, I love the sentiment. First off, great. Thank you for saying that. Then I thought, you're not helping marketing, right? You're not doing marketing a favor. Marketing is not in the business of favors. We're doing the thing that is strategically imperative for our business, which is turning you into an evangelist for our product, for our community, and trying to do the best job of getting our company's message out there in front of as many people as possible. And like, that's where it's like, there's so many executives that when you record with them, they feel like they're happy to do it as a favor to marketing. And it's just like, that's just like, when I talk, it's just a lack of sophistication, right? Like, to be fully honest. I mean, like, any other way you say it, like, and again, like, go look at your peers. Like, you think that Sam Altman's taking a day off from being in the press? Like, never. Or Dario, right. You think he is? Never. Right?
Right.
Like, they're not taking a day off ever from being in the press. Yeah. But yet you have sort of a startup executive who says like, hey, this is a favor for marketing. So again, I know I'm sort of being overly dramatic, but it's true, right? It's like, you got to do it. Like, you got to.
I totally agree. And I think as a marketing leader, trying to identify those voices internally, and they can be at all levels.
Right.
For us, our CEO, Ganesh, Shankar is, fantastic. Our CTO, Sunder, is amazing. And he doesn't love to speak publicly, but he's like phenomenal. and the reason is he's in both cases super authentic, very informed on customer needs, very empathetic, and they actually have things to talk about that the audience wants to hear about. And so, that combination of authenticity and relevance and willingness to engage is important. And I've been fortunate; neither of them view it as a favor. It's more of like, at least in those cases, an understanding of the role. But and there's some others that we've got in our organization, but that not only in our own organization, but the ecosystem itself, again, including customers. And so, like, identifying this handful of folks or characters in the storytelling that can help bring the value proposition to life is important. And I think it's also, I've seen a number of cases, not so much here, but where there is a belief, well, the best product's going to win. And, in marketing, it's like an expense. And it's like, it's often that the best product doesn't win. And at least certainly early on, and marketing is an investment, and it needs to be invested effectively in storytelling is a key part of it. And the category shaping, the messaging, the positioning, the activation, the influence of the customer, like all that needs to be done really well. A lot of marketing teams don't do it well, but those that do exceptionally well do tie into that core value proposition and really, bring to life the value that's being delivered in ways that are human and interesting. And one of the things I'm most excited about is that we did a Winning Secrets campaign where it wasn't about how our customers are using responsive, because again, nobody cares about that.
Yeah.
It was like, I wish it's like they don't, but they were very interested. Prospects are very interested in hearing what other response leaders are doing within their own businesses outside of the software to help their organizations grow. And so playing a role in terms of like activating that story, super fun, very, it's just very gratifying, as a marketing leader at Responsive to help bring that to life. And then we do benefit, because it's like, oh, well, what are they, ultimately the question becomes, well, what are they using? But that's more of the future of B2B marketing in my mind. The future of marketing is customer success.
Yeah.
And how customers are getting value, and bring that to life authentically. And I think back to the, Drive to Survive, the thing that's there that's so interesting. It's like, it's authentic human storytelling within the context of like high stakes racing. But
yeah,
the combination is a winning combination.
Yeah. There's 3 people that your audience wants to hear from. It's your CEO, because they set the vision for the company.
Yes.
I call this the CEO easy button, where it's like any conversation that you ever had with anyone, if you could press the easy button, and instead of who you're talking to at this moment, you could talk to the CEO, everyone would just press the button, right?
Yeah.
So if that's the case, wouldn't you want your CEO talking about the future, the product, the customer?
Totally.
Right? You would. That's because coming from them holds more value. So like number 1 is the CEO. Number 2 is your customers, right? Like they want to hear from your CEO, they want to hear from your customers. And the third one is anyone on your team that's interesting, right?
Yeah, there you go.
It's like
that's fair,
right? So it's like anyone else in the entire company, they could have any job in the company. They could be an intern, but if they are interesting, then they probably want to hear from them, because people like interesting people. And they could be funny, they could be really smart, they could be very self-deprecating, they could be silly. It doesn't matter if they're just interesting. And so it's like, if you can figure that out, and like the number of companies that have really figured out those 3 things is extremely small. And I think what you're seeing right now is the AI companies who have a lot of money are starting to figure that out, because their CEOs are everywhere. They're starting to get these customer stories, because they're starting to get actual stories about it. And then, the third thing is they're looking and hiring, like Lovable goes and gets Elena Verna and, et cetera. They're like pulling people into their orbit that are just really fun, talented people and interesting people. And, obviously the TVPN acquisition, stuff like that. Like that's what this is. Like, that's what that is. It's just a very human centric way of storytelling.
Well, and your key point too, like anyone that's interesting within the organization or somebody that people want to listen to. We have someone within our organization that started a thing called Coffee Chats, and so it's a regular, just, and it was born from the not having enough time to do one-on-one conversations with customers, and so then starting to set up smaller groups, and it just grew and grew and grew to like hundreds of people on a regular basis. And like, the person that was hosting becoming almost a mini celebrity amongst our customer base because super authentic, super relevant, fun to listen to. And so you're spot on. It's like, who really is going to, identifying who really resonates and putting investment behind that person.
Michael, this has been wonderful having you on the show. For our audience, you can go to responsive.io, and I recommend you do that. Fast, trusted answers that win deals. You got RFPs, you got RFIs, all sorts of different things on the platform. Michael, any final thoughts, anything to plug?
We try to really help our customers win more business faster with trusted winning responses. And so we feel incredibly fortunate to have the customers that we have, including 25 of the Fortune 100. It's been a great journey, the journey made possible working with them. And so it's been wonderful having this conversation with you, Ian. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, and take care.
You too.